Good day, everyone. We are Group 3, and we will be presenting Gender and Development in Nation Building, which consists of 6 topics. The first one is the definition of sex and gender and its difference. Next will be the gender identity, which also consists of typical gender roles, followed by defining what is gender stereotyping. The fourth one is a call to gender equality, together with the other gender-related concepts. Next is the gender and development milestone, followed by why genders matter to development. And lastly, identifying gender roles, triple roles. Here are the learning objectives. At the end of the section, the student should be able to first, differentiate sex from gender. Second, familiarize with other concepts related to gender and development. Third is to increase understanding about gender roles, stereotyping, and equality. Next is to increase awareness with gender and development. And lastly, to develop strategies to overcome gender inequalities, discrimination, and stereotyping. This is a quick overview of our today's topic. Women and men issues and challenges have become a worldwide concern. Long time ago, societies had been governed according to the culture dictates by society. In different parts of the world, it has been a practice that the highest leadership position like
consumption or income through work in or outside the home. Next is reproductive, relating to domestic or household tasks associated with creating and sustaining children and family. And lastly is the community management, relating to tasks and responsibility carried out for the benefit of the community. And remember that women must balance the demands of these three different roles and should be recognized for their contributions.
Gender and development milestone. Have you ever asked yourself how the issues on gender and development evolved? Let us do some trivia. The first official worldwide recognition of women's equality and non-discrimination on the basis of sex was established by the United Nations Charter of 1945 and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Conversely, up until the late 1960s, the focus was on women's reproductive role as women were seen as wives and mothers, and their main issues were supposed to be obtaining access to food, contraceptives, nutrition, and health care. In 1970s and 1980s, a new wave of debate moved beyond women's equality and the domestic sphere of their role as wives and mothers onto the global stage, where they are promoted as an aid for economic development. The significant outcome of this move was the event entitled First World Conference for Women held in Mexico in 1974. In this period, the United Nations promoted the Women in Development approach, which emphasized women's right to development, recognition of women's economic role in national economies, and most significantly, gave a voice to women in developing countries. Following frustration with the slow progress of women in development, other approaches emerged that criticized the women in development approach as being one of simply add women and steer. The women in development approach focused on the need for structural changes in the global political economy. The gender and development approach followed giving emphasis on larger inequities and unequal relations. Gender and development advocates called for a deeper understanding of the socially constructed basis of gender differences and how this impacts on relationships between men and women. They argue for an improved understanding of power relations and the gendered nature of systems and institutions which impact on the lives of women and men. Instead of incorporating women into the current patriarchal system, gender and development advocates argue for the transformation of the system into one characterized by gender equality. Further, states have continued to call for progress towards gender equality through a number of international agreements, regional platforms, and conferences. At the 1945 Fourth World Conference on Women held in Beijing, China, the most influential conference to date, states committed themselves in the Beijing Platforms of Action to establishing mechanisms to promote women's rights, including national action plans, gender strategies, and legal framework. In 2000, states confirmed their commitment to reducing gender inequalities through the United Nations Millennium Declaration. This was articulated specifically in Millennium Development Goal, which called for the promotion of gender equality and women's empowerment. Three indicators were chosen to represent this goal. First, the ratios of girls to boys in primary, secondary, and tertiary education. Second, the share of women in wage employment in the non-agricultural sector. And the third, the proportion of seats held by women in national parliament. Gender equality is also essential in order to achieve the other 7 Millennium Development Goals.
Why gender matters to development. World Development Report, WDR, in 2012, it defines gender as socially constructed norms and ideologies which determine the behaviors and actions of men and women. Understanding these gender relations and the power dynamic behind them is a prerequisite for understanding individuals' access to and distributions of resources, their ability to make decisions, and the way in which women and men, boys and girls are affected by political processes and social development. Compared with men, it is highly observable in different countries that women control fewer political and economic resources, including land, employment, and traditional positions of authority. Acknowledging and incorporating these gender inequalities into programs and analysis is therefore extremely important both from a human rights perspective and to maximize impact and socioeconomic development. The WDR highlights the importance of directly targeting the persistent constraints and obstacles to women's equality, especially areas of economic empowerment, educational gaps, household, societal voice, and violence against women, in order to enhance productivity and improve long term development outcomes. Gender equality is also important for sustainable peace, and there is growing body of empirical evidence suggesting that a higher level of gender inequality is associated with higher risk of internal conflicts. And also, here in the Philippines, many people, or at least in this generation, accept a gender for everyone. Either you are bisexual or they have organization where they protect each other. And also, gender also affects physical growth in infancy. Weight, length, and head circumference are greater in boys than in girls throughout the first year of life. Gender is of key importance in defining the power, privilege, and possibilities that some people have and some people do not have in given society. It affects progress towards equality and freedom from discriminations.
Identifying gender roles and triple roles. This involves who does what in a given community and the different roles and responsibility of a women and men that are assigned by the society. Work can be divided into three main categories. And women's roles encompass work in all these categories, and this is referred to as a women's triple roles. So yung gender roles is it refers dun sa different roles and responsibility ng isang lalaki at babae that is set by the society. And when we say triple roles naman, ito yung mga kayang gawin ng babae. Yung mga work na kaya nang gawin ng mga babae. First category is productive work. It involves the production of goods and services for consumption and trade, such as farming, fishing, employment, and self-employment. Next is when people are asked what they do. The response is most often related to productive work, especially work which is paid or generates income. So, next is both women and men can be involved in productive activities, but the most part, their functions and responsibility will differ according to the gender division of labor. Okay. And lastly is women's productive work is often less visible and less valued than men's. Next category is reproductive work. In reproductive work, it involves the care and maintenance of the household and its members, including bearing and caring for children, food preparation, water and fuel collection, shopping, housekeeping, and family health care. Next is it's also crucial to human survival, yet it is seldom considered real work. Lastly is in poor communities, reproductive work is for the most part manual labor intensive and time consuming. It is almost always the responsibility of women and girls. And last category is community work. In community work naman, it involves the collective organizations of social events and services, ceremonies and celebrations, community improvement activities, participation in groups and organizations, local political activities, and so on. Next this is this type of work is seldom considered in economic analysis of communities. And also, however, it involves considerable volunteer time and is important for the spiritual and cultural development of communities and as a vehicle for community organizations and self-determination. And lastly is both women and men engage in community activities, although a gender division of labor also prevails here.
Women, men, boys, and girls are likely to be involved in all three areas of work. In many societies, however, women do almost all of the reproductive and much of the productive work. Any intervention in one area will affect the other areas. Meeting these needs may require social engineering and women empowerment. Meeting these needs helps women to achieve greater equality and challenges their subordinate position. In this case, establishing awareness among men and women about their respective potentialities, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, considering their different needs in coming up with a development project or program will lead to equal success and opportunities for boys, girls, men and women in society. To conclude, understanding the gender differences and gender needs is highly essential if we want to achieve sustainable development in every component of our society. God created men and women equally but with their own uniqueness, and that is to complement the needs of each other. Everybody should be treated equally and have a chance to have access to all resources and opportunities.